In the midst of the Terran-Voxian War, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a dedicated human field medic, faces an impossible choice. Amid a brutal bombing raid on the planet Kepler 442b, she defies orders and risks everything to save the very enemy her people are fighting against: Voxian children caught in the crossfire. Her act of mercy, a beacon of humanity's compassion, becomes a war crime in the eyes of her superiors. Arrested and court-martialed, Elena is sentenced to 15 years in military prison. What follows is not just the tale of one woman's defiance, but the spark that ignites a revolution. As Earth prepares to send its deadliest criminals to rescue her, the galaxy is about to learn that mercy can be far more dangerous than any weapon. The Medic's Choice. The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the battlefield as Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt beside another wounded soldier. The red sand beneath her knees had turned dark with blood, and the acrid smell of burned metal filled the air. She pressed her hands against the plasma burn on the young Marine's chest, feeling the heat still radiating from the wound. "You're going to be okay, Thompson," she whispered, injecting a pain reliever into his neck. "Just stay with me." Private Thompson's eyes were wide with fear and shock. He couldn't have been more than 19, fresh out of basic training on Mars. Elena had seen too many faces like his over the past 8 months of fighting on this dusty world. The Terran-Voxian War had been raging for 3 years, but this planet had become its bloodiest theater. "Doc, we need to move," Sergeant Williams called out, his voice strained. "Intel says another wave of Voxian fighters is coming in from the north. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're on top of us." Elena looked around the makeshift medical station they'd set up in the ruins of what used to be a human mining facility. 7 wounded soldiers lay on stretchers, 3 of them in critical condition. Moving them now could kill them, but staying might mean death for everyone. "I need 15 minutes, she called back. "Martinez is barely stable, and Thompson needs surgery or he'll bleed out." Williams appeared at her shoulder, his weathered face grim. "Elena, I'm sorry, but we don't have 15 minutes. The evac shuttle is coming in hot, and if we miss it, we're all dead." She looked down at Thompson, who was trying to speak. His lips moved silently, and she leaned closer to hear him. "My mom," he whispered. "Tell her I tried to do good." Elena's heart clenched. She had joined the Terran Medical Corps to save lives, not to watch young soldiers die on alien soil. But this was war, and war had its own brutal mathematics. Save the many, lose the few. It was a calculation she'd been forced to make too many times. "Load the ones who can travel," she said finally. "I'll stay with the critical cases and wait for the next transport." Williams shook his head. "There might not be a next transport. The Voxians are pushing hard on all fronts. Command is talking about pulling back to the orbital stations." Before Elena could respond, a new sound cut through the air. It was different from the usual whine of human plasma weapons or the deep thrumming of Voxian energy cannons. This was something else entirely, a high-pitched whistling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What is that?" Thompson asked weakly. Elena's blood ran cold as she recognized the sound. She'd heard it only once before, during the siege of New Geneva. "Orbital bombardment," she said. "Everyone down!" The first impact shook the ground like an earthquake. Elena threw herself over Thompson, shielding him with her body as debris rained down around them. The second impact was closer, and the third closer still. Through the dust and smoke, she could see flashes of light on the horizon where the bombardment was walking its way across the landscape. "They're targeting the settlement," Williams shouted over the noise. "The Voxian civilian settlement 2 kilometers south." Elena's mind raced. The Voxian settlement had been established before the war, a peaceful farming community that had been caught in the middle when hostilities broke out. According to the intelligence briefings, it housed mostly non-combatants, farmers, artisans, and their families. The Terran High Command had classified it as a military target because some of the adult males had been conscripted into the Voxian defense forces, but Elena knew there were children there, lots of children. "We have to help them," she said, starting to gather her medical supplies. Williams grabbed her arm. "Elena, no. Our orders are clear. We don't treat enemy wounded, It's against regulations. She stared at him in disbelief. They're bombing civilians, Tom. Children are going to die. They're the enemy, he said firmly. Our job is to save human lives, not Voxian ones. Elena pulled free from his grip and began stuffing medical supplies into her field pack. My job is to save lives, period. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't have a species requirement. Dr. Vasquez, I'm ordering you to stand down, Williams said, his voice taking on the formal tone of military command. You will not provide aid to enemy combatants or civilians. Elena stood up, her medical pack slung over her shoulder. Then I guess you'll have to court-martial me. She started walking toward the settlement, her boots crunching on the broken glass and twisted metal scattered across the ground. Behind her she could hear Williams shouting orders, but she didn't look back. The bombardment was intensifying, and every second she delayed meant more innocent lives lost. The 2-kilometer journey to the settlement felt like the longest walk of her life. The orbital bombardment had carved a path of destruction across the landscape, leaving smoking craters and scattered debris. As she got closer, Elena could see the extent of the damage. What had been a thriving agricultural community was now a scene of devastation. The first person she found was a young Voxian female, probably no more than 12 years old in human terms. The Voxians were a reptilian species, with scaled skin that ranged from deep green to pale yellow. This child's scales were a bright emerald color, but they were dulled by dust and blood from a deep gash across her forehead. Elena knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. The Voxian cardiovascular system was different from human anatomy, but she'd studied xenobiology during her medical training. The child's pulse was weak but steady, and her breathing was shallow but regular. It's okay, Elena whispered, knowing the child probably couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone would be comforting. I'm here to help. She cleaned the wound and applied a biogel patch that would work on Voxian physiology. The child's eyes fluttered open, large and golden with vertical pupils. For a moment, they stared at each other across the vast gulf of species difference, and then the child did something that nearly broke Elena's heart. She smiled. Elena spent the next 3 hours moving through the ruins of the settlement, treating the wounded wherever she found them. She set broken bones, sutured lacerations, and administered pain medication to those who were beyond her ability to save. Most of the adult Voxians were wary of her at first, but when they saw her gentle treatment of their children, they began to trust her. The worst case was an elderly male who had been caught in a building collapse. His lower body was crushed, and Elena knew there was nothing she could do to save him. But she could ease his pain and sit with him as he died, holding his scaled hand in hers as his breathing grew shallow and finally stopped. By the time the Terran search and rescue team found her, Elena had treated 47 wounded Voxians. She was covered in dust and blood, both human and alien, and her medical supplies were nearly exhausted. She looked up as the soldiers surrounded her, their weapons raised. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team leader announced, you are under arrest for violation of the Terran Military Code, Article 47, rendering aid to enemy combatants. You will come with us immediately. Elena stood slowly, her knees stiff from kneeling for so long. Around her, the wounded Voxians watched with frightened eyes as the human soldiers took her away. The young female she had treated first was crying, calling out in her native language. I'm sorry, Elena said to the child, though she knew she couldn't understand. I'm so sorry. The court-martial took place aboard the TDF Retribution, a massive dreadnought that served as the fleet's mobile command center. Elena sat in the defendant's chair, still wearing her blood-stained medical uniform, as the charges were read against her. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the prosecutor began, you stand accused of deliberately disobeying direct orders, providing aid and comfort to the enemy, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. How do you plead? Elena stood. Guilty, Your Honor. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Her defense attorney, a young lieutenant named Parker, looked shocked. Dr. Vasquez, we discussed this. You don't have to. I'm guilty, Elena repeated, her voice clear and strong. I disobeyed orders. I treated enemy wounded. I would do it again. The judge, Admiral Harrison, leaned forward. Dr. Vasquez, do you understand the seriousness of these charges? You're facing 15 years in a military prison. Elena nodded. I understand, sir. But I also understand that I took an oath to preserve life wherever I found it. Those were children, Admiral. Innocent children who had done nothing wrong except be born on the wrong side of a war they didn't start. Those children will grow up to be enemy soldiers, the prosecutor argued. Your actions may have saved lives that will one day be used against humanity. Maybe, Elena said. Or maybe they'll grow up to be doctors, or teachers, or farmers. Maybe one of them will be the person who finds a way to end this war. I don't know what the future holds, but I know what I saw in that settlement. I saw suffering, and I had the power to ease it. That's what being a doctor means. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified about Elena's character, her service record, and her actions on Kepler 442b. The media coverage was intense, with news outlets across human space debating the ethics of her choice. Some called her a traitor, others called her a hero. In the end, the verdict was guilty on all charges. Elena was sentenced to 15 years in the Titan Penal Colony, a military prison in the outer system. As the sentence was read, she stood at attention, her face calm. But as the transport ship carried her away from the fleet, Elena had no idea that her actions had sparked something far beyond a simple court-martial. On Earth, in the halls of power, a very different kind of discussion was taking place. In a secure bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Director Sarah Chen of the Terran Special Operations Command was reviewing Elena's case file. Across from her sat General Marcus Webb, a man whose scarred face told the story of a lifetime of hard choices. She's become a symbol, Chen said. The protests on Earth are growing. People are calling for her release, saying she's being punished for having a conscience. Webb nodded grimly. The Voxians are using her story for propaganda. They're saying it proves humans can show mercy, that maybe there's a path to peace. Is there? Chen asked. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. But first, we need to get her back. The Voxians are demanding her release as a condition for peace talks. The military won't agree to that. It would undermine discipline across the entire armed forces. Then we'll have to find another way, Webb said. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Chen raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We send the Dark Star Battalion. Chen's face went pale. The Dark Star Battalion was the military's most classified unit, composed entirely of criminals and military prisoners who had been given a choice: serve their sentence in prison or serve their sentence in the most dangerous missions the military had to offer. It was a unit that officially didn't exist, used for operations that were too dirty or too dangerous for regular soldiers. Marcus, you can't be serious. They're criminals, murderers, thieves. They're also the best at what they do, Webb interrupted. And right now, what we need is someone who can think outside the box, someone who doesn't play by the rules. Chen stared at him. You want to send criminals to rescue a woman who's in prison for showing mercy? Webb smiled grimly. I want to send criminals to show the galaxy that humanity values mercy enough to risk everything for it. Dr. Elena Vasquez made a choice that might have seemed foolish to a military court, but it's exactly the kind of choice that defines what it means to be human. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. Besides, who better to break someone out of prison than people who've spent their lives breaking the rules? As the transport ship carrying Elena disappeared into the darkness of space, neither she nor her captors knew that Earth's most dangerous criminals were already being briefed on their next mission. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its military might. It was its refusal to abandon those who dared to show mercy in a merciless universe. The Outcasts' mission, the maximum security transport ship Penance, drifted through the void between Jupiter and Saturn, its hull scarred from years of ferrying humanity's most dangerous criminals. Inside the cramped cargo bay, 12 figures sat chained to metal benches, their orange prison uniforms standing out against the gray walls. Captain Rex Morrison ran his fingers through his graying hair and studied the holographic display that had materialized in front of them. The man across from him, General Webb, wore the kind of expression that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Let me get this straight," Rex said, his voice carrying the flat accent of the Mars colonies. "You want us to break into the most secure prison facility in Voxian space, extract one human doctor, and somehow make it back alive?" "That's the simplified version, yes," Webb replied. Rex laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And in return?" "Full pardons for all of you, clean records, citizen status restored, and a chance to serve your species instead of rotting in a cell." Sarah Chen, seated at the far end of the bench, looked up from cleaning her fingernails with a piece of sharpened metal she'd somehow acquired. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Webb's expression didn't change. "The catch is that you'll be operating completely off the books. If you're captured, Earth will deny any knowledge of your existence. If you die, your families will be told you died in a prison accident." "Families?" Dr. Marcus Rodriguez spoke for the first time, his voice bitter. "Most of us don't have families anymore. That's why we're here." Rex studied the faces of his fellow prisoners. Sarah Chen had been the Martian Liberation Front's top assassin before her capture. Marcus Rodriguez was a brilliant scientist who'd been caught selling military biotechnology to the highest bidder. Tommy Ghost Nakamura had hacked into the Terran defense network just to prove he could. Maria Santos had commanded a pirate fleet that terrorized shipping lanes for 3 years. They were murderers, thieves, traitors, and worse. But they were also the most talented criminals humanity had ever produced. "Why her?" Rex asked, gesturing at the image of Dr. Elena Vasquez that floated in the hologram. "What makes one doctor worth this kind of risk?" Webb was quiet for a moment. "Because she did something that's rarer than diamonds in this universe. She chose compassion over orders. And right now, the galaxy is watching to see what humanity does about that choice." The mission briefing took 6 hours. They studied Voxian prison ship designs, learned about alien security protocols, and memorized the layout of the detention facility where Elena was being held. The ship, called the Judgment's Edge, was a massive vessel that served as both a prison and a mobile court system for the Voxian military. "The ship has 3 main sections," Webb explained, manipulating the hologram to show a cross-section view. "Command and control at the front, detention facilities in the middle, and engineering at the rear. Dr. Vasquez is being held in maximum security, level 7. "Security?" Sarah asked. "Energy barriers, automated defense systems, and about 300 Voxian guards. The ship also travels with an escort of 12 destroyers." Tommy whistled low. "Sounds like fun. How exactly are we supposed to get close to this thing?" Webb smiled for the first time since the briefing began. "We're going to give you some tools that officially don't exist." The next 3 days were spent in a classified facility hidden in the asteroid belt. Rex had to admit he was impressed with what Earth's Black Projects division had accomplished. The ship they were given looked like a standard cargo hauler, but its hull was lined with stealth composites that made it nearly invisible to sensors. The weapon systems were hidden behind false panels, and the engines were military-grade. "She's called the Redemption," the technician explained. "Appropriate, don't you think?" More impressive were the personal equipment packages. Rex strapped on body armor that felt lighter than cloth, but could stop a plasma bolt. Sarah's weapons kit included projectile guns that fired rounds designed to penetrate Voxian scales. Marcus received a field laboratory that could synthesize chemical compounds in minutes. "Remember," Webb said as they prepared to depart, "your mission is extraction, not combat. Get in, get the doctor, get out. Don't engage unless you have no choice." Rex looked around at his team. "General, with all due respect, you're sending criminals to do an impossible job. Combat is probably the only thing we're good at." "That's what I'm counting on," Webb replied. The journey to Voxian space took 8 days. Rex used the time to drill his team and plan contingencies. They ran simulations, practiced with their equipment, and slowly began to function as a unit instead of a collection of individuals. On the 6th day, Sarah approached him during the night watch. "You really think we can pull this off?" Rex was staring out at the stars through the small viewport. "Honestly, probably not. But I'd rather die trying to save someone who showed mercy than rot in a prison cell." "Why do you care? You don't even know her." Rex was quiet for a long moment. "My daughter would have been about her age. Would have been a doctor too, if the Martian uprising hadn't happened." Sarah didn't ask what had happened to his daughter. In their world, some stories were too painful to tell. They found the Voxian prison convoy exactly where intelligence had predicted, traveling through a relatively empty system near the border. The Judgment's edge was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Its escort ships moved in a defensive formation around it. "There's our target," Rex said, studying the tactical display. "Ideas?" "We could try a frontal assault," Maria suggested. "Hit them fast and hard, overwhelm their defenses." "Against 13 ships? We'd last about 30 seconds, Tommy replied. Marcus looked up from his console. "What if we don't attack the ships? What if we attack the crews?" Rex turned to look at the scientist. "Explain." Marcus pulled up a schematic of Voxian physiology. "I've been studying their biology. They're vulnerable to certain airborne compounds that wouldn't affect humans. I could synthesize something that would incapacitate them without permanent damage." "How would we deliver it?" "Their life support systems. If we could get close enough to dock with one of the escort ships, I could introduce the compound into their air recycling system. It would spread throughout the convoy within hours." Sarah shook her head. "Getting close enough to dock is suicide. Their sensors would detect us long before we got in range." Tommy grinned. "Not if they invited us in." Rex raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I've been monitoring their communications. They're expecting a supply ship from their home system. If I could hack their network and insert fake shipping orders..." "They'd think we were the supply ship," Rex finished. "Brilliant. How long do you need?" "Give me 2 hours." The plan was insane, but then again, so were they. Tommy worked his magic on the Voxian communication network while Marcus synthesized his chemical compound. Sarah and Maria prepared the boarding equipment, and Rex plotted their approach vector. 2 hours later, the Redemption was transmitting Voxian identification codes and requesting permission to dock with the escort ship Swift Talon. Rex held his breath as they waited for a response. "Supply vessel cargo wing, you are cleared for docking. Bay 7 is open and waiting." Rex let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Tommy, you're a genius." "I know. It's a burden I carry with grace." The docking procedure went smoothly. Too smoothly, Rex thought. But there was no backing out now. As soon as the airlock sealed, Marcus released his compound into the ship's ventilation system. The effects were almost immediate. Voxian crew members began collapsing at their stations, overcome by a peaceful sleep that would last for hours. Rex's team moved through the ship like ghosts, securing critical systems and ensuring the compound reached every section. "How long before it spreads to the other ships?" Rex asked. Marcus checked his readings. "Their ventilation systems are interconnected when they're in convoy formation. 30 minutes, maybe less." One by one, the ships of the convoy went dark as their crews succumbed to Marcus's compound. The massive prison ship Judgment's Edge was the last to fall silent. "Time to go to work," Rex said. Boarding the prison ship was like entering a tomb. The corridors were filled with sleeping Voxians, from guards to administrators to prisoners. Rex's team made their way through the maze of passages, following Tommy's real-time hacking of the ship's navigation system. Level 7 was exactly as advertised: maximum security. Energy barriers blocked every entrance, and automated defense turrets tracked their movement. But the defenses had been designed to keep prisoners in, not to keep determined criminals out. Sarah's explosives took care of the barriers. Tommy's hacking disabled the turrets. Maria's lockpicking skills opened the cell doors that their technology couldn't handle. They found Elena in cell 47C, sitting on a narrow bunk and reading from a digital tablet. She looked up as they entered, her dark eyes taking in their weapons and military gear. "Dr. Elena Vasquez?" Rex asked. "Yes. Who are you?" "The cavalry. We're here to take you home." Elena stood slowly. "I don't understand. Earth doesn't negotiate with terrorists." Sarah laughed. "Lady, we are the terrorists. Or we were, anyway." Rex extended his hand. "Dr. Vasquez, we're from Earth. Specifically, we're from the parts of Earth that your government usually keeps locked up. But today, we're here to bring you home." Elena stared at them for a long moment. "You're criminals." "The worst kind," Rex agreed. "But right now, we're also your best hope of getting out of here alive." The extraction went smoothly until they reached the hangar bay. As they prepared to board the Redemption, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Marcus's compound was wearing off faster than expected. "Move! Move! Move!" Rex shouted as Voxian guards began appearing at the far end of the hangar. Energy bolts filled the air as they ran for their ship. Sarah and Maria provided covering fire while Tommy and Marcus got Elena aboard. Rex was the last one through the airlock, diving through the closing door as plasma bolts scorched the metal around him. The Redemption launched just as the Judgment's edge began to come back to life. Rex pushed the engines to their limits, racing for the edge of the system as the Voxian ships gave chase. "Can we outrun them?" Elena asked, strapping herself into a seat. "In a straight line?" "No," Rex replied, his hands flying over the controls. "But we're not running in a straight line." What followed was the most insane chase of Rex's career, and that was saying something. He piloted the Redemption through an asteroid field, used a gas giant's atmosphere to break sensor locks, and performed maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. Behind them, the Voxian ships struggled to keep up. Their pursuit vessels were larger and more powerful, but they weren't designed for the kind of reckless flying that Rex specialized in. "Hyperspace beacon in range," Tommy announced. 30 seconds to jump point." "They're gaining on us," Maria called out. 2 destroyers breaking off from the main group." Rex pushed the engines past their red line. The ship shuddered and groaned but held together. "Come on, baby. Just a little farther." The hyperspace jump was the most beautiful thing Rex had ever seen. One moment they were being chased by angry Voxians, the next they were in the safety of hyperspace, racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds. Elena sat in the common area, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. "Why?" she asked. "Why did Earth send you?" Rex sat down across from her. "Because what you did mattered. You showed mercy when everyone else was showing hatred. You saved lives when you could have followed orders. I'm going to be court-martialed when we get back. My career is over." "Maybe. But you'll be alive to face that court-martial. And sometimes, that's all the victory you get." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "What about all of you? What happens when we reach Earth?" Rex exchanged glances with his team. "Honestly, we don't know. Maybe they'll honor their promise and give us pardons. Maybe they'll throw us back in prison. But for the first time in years, we did something that mattered." Sarah looked up from cleaning her weapons. "We saved someone who was worth saving. That's more than most people can say." As the Redemption raced through hyperspace toward Earth, none of them knew that their mission had already changed the galaxy. The story of Elena's rescue was spreading across human space, carried by reporters who had somehow learned about the classified operation. More importantly, it was spreading through Voxian space as well. The young Voxian female that Elena had treated was now telling her story to anyone who would listen. She spoke of the human doctor who had risked everything to save enemy children, and of the criminals who had risked everything to save her. In the halls of power on both worlds, politicians and military leaders were beginning to realize that this war might not end the way they had expected. Sometimes mercy was more powerful than weapons. Sometimes criminals could be heroes. And sometimes doing the right thing was worth any price. The New Alliance. 6 months after her rescue, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the massive space facility. The neutral station, built in the empty space between human and Voxian territory, had become the symbol of something nobody had expected: peace. Hard to believe, isn't it? Rex Morrison joined her at the viewport, his prison uniform replaced by the blue and white of the new Terran Medical Corps. 6 months ago, we were shooting at each other. Now look at this place. Elena smiled, though her eyes remained serious. It's not over yet, Rex. The hardliners on both sides are still pushing for war. This peace is fragile. Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see Voxian merchants trading with human entrepreneurs, their scaled hands and soft human fingers exchanging goods and data chips. Children of both species played together in the station's recreational areas, their laughter echoing through the corridors. "Dr. Vasquez, Colonel Morrison," a voice called behind them. They turned to see Ambassador Teketh approaching, her emerald scales catching the light from the artificial suns. The Voxian diplomat had been instrumental in the peace negotiations, but Elena noticed the strain around her golden eyes. "Ambassador," Elena replied, "how did the council meeting go?" Teketh's expression darkened. "Not well. The military faction is gaining support on my homeworld. They're saying that humans cannot be trusted, that your rescue was a trick to make us lower our guard." Rex frowned. "What kind of evidence are they using?" "The same evidence they've always used: fear and old hatred. They point to human military buildup, to the weapons research that continues in your outer colonies. They say that mercy is just another form of warfare." Elena felt her heart sink. She had hoped that her actions on Kepler 442b and the dramatic rescue that followed would be enough to shift public opinion on both sides. But changing the minds of entire civilizations was harder than treating wounded children. "There's something else," Teketh continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Our scientists have discovered something disturbing. We're not sure how to interpret the data, but it appears that our aggression toward humans may not be entirely natural." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. Before Teketh could answer, the station's communication system crackled to life. "Dr. Vasquez and Colonel Morrison to the command center immediately. Priority Alpha." They found the command center buzzing with activity. Admiral Harrison, Elena's former judge, stood before a massive holographic display showing star charts and ship movements. Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez were there too, along with several other members of the criminal team that had become Elena's unlikely allies. "What's the situation?" Rex asked. Harrison turned, his weathered face grim. "We've got problems. The Voxian military has launched a surprise attack on 3 human colonies in the Tau Ceti system. At the same time, human hardliners are demanding an immediate military response." Elena stared at the display. "But what about the peace talks? The treaty we've been negotiating?" "Dead in the water," Harrison replied. "Both sides are blaming the other for the breakdown. We're looking at full-scale war resuming within days." Marcus Rodriguez spoke up from his position at a scientific console. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the data that Ambassador Teketh brought us. I think I know why the Voxians attacked." All eyes turned to the former criminal scientist. Marcus had proven himself invaluable during the peace negotiations, using his biotechnology expertise to help bridge the gap between human and Voxian physiology. "Show me," Harrison said. Marcus manipulated the holographic controls, and a complex molecular diagram appeared in the center of the room. "This is a parasitic organism that we found in tissue samples from several Voxian soldiers. It's microscopic, almost impossible to detect without specialized equipment." Elena studied the diagram. "I've never seen anything like this. What does it do?" "It enhances aggression and reduces empathy," Marcus explained. "The organism feeds on certain neurochemicals that are produced during violent emotional states. In essence, it's turning its hosts into killing machines." Teketh stepped forward, her scales pale with shock. "You're saying my people are being controlled by parasites?" "Not controlled exactly," Marcus said. "More like influenced. The organism doesn't override free will, but it makes violent choices seem more appealing and peaceful solutions less attractive. Sarah Chen looked up from her tactical display. Where did these things come from? Are they natural to Voxian biology? Marcus shook his head. That's the disturbing part. Based on the genetic analysis, these organisms are artificial. Someone created them and introduced them into the Voxian population. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Someone wanted this war to happen. But who? Rex asked. Who benefits from humans and Voxians destroying each other? Their answer came from an unexpected source. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike anything Elena had ever seen. It was tall and thin, with translucent skin that revealed strange organs beneath. Its eyes were black pools that seemed to absorb light. Greetings, the being said, its voice somehow reaching them without moving its mouth. I am Nexus Prime of the Ethereal Collective. We have been observing your species for some time. Harrison stepped forward. How did you access our communications? Your technology is primitive but adequate. We have been monitoring your conflict with great interest. The being's expressionless face somehow conveyed amusement. The biological agents you discovered were our creation. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. You started this war. Millions of people have died. Death is irrelevant, Nexus Prime replied. What matters is that both your species have proven remarkably resilient. Humans with their adaptability and moral flexibility, Voxians with their strength and determination. You will make excellent additions to our collective. Additions? Teketh asked. We are collectors of useful species. Once you have sufficiently weakened each other through warfare, we will arrive to harvest the survivors. Those who submit will be incorporated into our collective. Those who resist will be eliminated. The view screen went dark, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Well, Sarah said finally, that explains a lot. Harrison turned to his staff. How long do we have? Based on the energy signatures we detected during that transmission, I'd estimate their main fleet is about 6 months away, Tommy Nakamura said from his position at the sensor station. Elena looked around the room at the faces of people who had become her unlikely family. We have to warn everyone. Humans, Voxians, everyone. Warn them of what? Harrison asked. That an alien collective is coming to harvest the survivors of our war? Even if they believe us, do you think that will stop the fighting? Rex smiled grimly. Actually, Admiral, it might. Nothing brings enemies together like a bigger enemy. The next few weeks were the most intense of Elena's life. Using Harmony Station as their base, they launched a desperate campaign to unite the warring species. Elena's medical expertise proved crucial in developing a treatment for the parasitic organisms. Marcus's scientific knowledge helped create countermeasures. The former criminals used their unique skills to gather intelligence and spread the word through unofficial channels. The breakthrough came when Elena successfully treated a group of infected Voxian soldiers. As the parasites died and were flushed from their systems, the soldiers' natural personalities returned. The difference was dramatic and immediate. I remember now, one of them said, his golden eyes clear for the first time in months. The humans on Kepler 442b. They weren't monsters. They were just soldiers, like us. The news spread rapidly through both human and Voxian space. Military leaders who had been calling for total war suddenly found themselves questioning their own motivations. Scientists on both sides began testing for the parasitic organisms and finding them everywhere. But the real turning point came when the young Voxian female that Elena had treated on Kepler 442b made a public broadcast. Her name was Zarath, and she had become something of a celebrity among her people for her stories about the kind human doctor. I have been tested, she announced to a gathering of Voxian military leaders. The parasites are gone from my system now thanks to the human cure. For the first time in months I can think clearly. And what I think is this: the humans are not our enemies. Our real enemy is coming, and we need to stand together. The image of a young Voxian defending humanity proved more powerful than any diplomatic negotiation. Within days, Ceasefire agreements were being signed across multiple star systems. The joint fleet that assembled at Harmony Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human destroyers flew alongside Voxian battlecruisers. Former enemies shared tactical information and coordinated their defenses. Elena found herself appointed as Chief Medical Officer of the combined fleet, a position that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. She worked around the clock to ensure that every ship had supplies of the anti-parasitic treatment. When the Ethereal Collective finally arrived, they found not the weakened, war-torn civilizations they had expected, but a unified force ready to defend their freedom. The battle was fierce but brief. The Ethereals were technologically advanced, but they had never faced species that fought with both logic and emotion, that combined tactical brilliance with moral courage. Human creativity and Voxian determination proved to be a formidable combination. The decisive moment came when Elena led a boarding party onto the ethereal flagship. Using modified medical equipment, she and her team introduced the anti-parasitic treatment directly into the ship's atmospheric systems. The effect on the ethereals was unexpected. As the parasitic organisms died, the ethereal crew members began to change. Their black eyes cleared, revealing normal pupils underneath. Their translucent skin gained color and texture. "What's happening to them?" Rex asked as they watched an ethereal soldier stumble and fall. Elena checked her readings. "I think the parasites weren't just infecting us. They were infecting the ethereals too, maybe for so long that they've become dependent on them." What they discovered was that the Ethereal Collective had once been a peaceful species, much like humans and Voxians. But they had been infected by the parasites for thousands of years, turned into a harvesting force that spread the infection to other species. With the parasites gone, the true Ethereals began to remember who they had been. Their leader, no longer calling himself Nexus Prime, introduced himself as Scholar Ventar. "We have been slaves for so long," he said, his voice now carrying emotion. "You have freed us from a nightmare we had forgotten we were living." The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Elena found herself at the center of efforts to rebuild relationships between species that had been manipulated into conflict. The Terran Medical Corps, with Elena as its director, became the galaxy's primary force for healing both physical and social wounds. Rex and his team were officially pardoned and given positions in the new galactic peacekeeping force. Their criminal skills, it turned out, were perfectly suited for preventing the kind of manipulation that had nearly destroyed two civilizations. A year later, Elena stood once again on the observation deck of Harmony Station, now expanded into a sprawling city in space. The view was even more remarkable than before. Human, Voxian, and ethereal children played together in the gardens. Scientists from all three species worked on joint research projects. Merchants and diplomats moved freely between sections that had once been segregated. "Any regrets?" Rex asked, joining her as he had so many times before. Elena smiled, watching a group of mixed-species medical students practice their skills on holographic patients. "About disobeying orders to save those children? Never." "What about us, your criminal rescue team?" Elena laughed. "Rex, you and your team proved something that the galaxy needed to learn. Sometimes the people society throws away are exactly the ones who can save it. You showed mercy when mercy was needed most." Teketh approached them, her scales now a healthy bright green. As the first Voxian to be completely cured of the parasitic infection, she had become a symbol of the new alliance. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, "the Council has approved your proposal for the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. Students from all our worlds will be able to train together." Elena felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's heating systems. "Thank you, Ambassador. I think this will help ensure that we never forget the lessons we've learned." As she watched the bustling station around her, Elena reflected on how far they had all come. A simple act of mercy toward wounded children had sparked a chain of events that saved three civilizations and created something new. A truly galactic community based on understanding and mutual aid. The criminals who had rescued her had found their redemption. The enemies who had fought each other had found their common ground. And she had found her true calling, not just healing individual patients, but healing the wounds between entire species. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. BC, EC, yes, CTs.